Welcome back, Kaiju fans. Today, we're going to be talking about Godzilla 2, King of the Monsters. We're going to be discussing King Ghidorah's origins. Now, King Ghidorah, being one of the most common, if not the most common, nemesis, evil monster, you name it, in not just the Godzilla franchise, but Toho's kaiju and tokusatsu production in general. Ghidorah is the most reoccurring monster. Now, we've seen Ghidorah have a lot of origins in the past 60 years. And they're all pretty different. I mean, obviously, the most common is King Ghidorah is a space monster. That was the typical Showa era explanation. Ghidorah came from space. The Heisei, or the 90s era, is where we get to diverge a little bit. We only have one Ghidorah in the Godzilla franchise in that time frame. And Ghidorah is a basically genetic experiment of conducted by people from the future who had come back in time to try to replace Godzilla and create Ghidorah in its place. So that was kind of a different take on Ghidorah. The Mothra franchise, though, is going to be the more focused area on this video, and in the first Rebirth of Mothra movie, we get Death Ghidorah. And Death Ghidorah is basically a version of King Ghidorah, the original four-legged Ghidorah, where he is sealed, or has been sealed, underground, and has been waiting there, basically lying in wait to be awoken. That's a little different too. We have a Earth Ghidorah. And then in Rebirth of Mothra 3, we have Cretaceous Ghidorah and Grand King Ghidorah. And here is where it's interesting. They're the same kaiju, separated by millions of years. Cretaceous King Ghidorah is a dinosaur version of Ghidorah that lived with the dinosaurs and basically preyed on them. This looks like it would fit into our legendary universe very well, because our kaiju are all ancient super creatures. So this Ghidorah, the Cretaceous Ghidorah, was born in that time frame, lived in that time frame, and what it did was it fed on all of the dinosaurs and was the reason the dinosaurs were extinct, if you never watched this movie. So what it did was, once there was nothing left to eat on the planet, it left in search of a new food source. And then in the future, in the 20th century, it returned because it now had a new food source, humanity. But it had grown in that time frame, and it became Grand King Ghidorah, and became more of a traditional kaiju size of the Heisei era, so it's really, really big, 100 plus meters. So we have this Ghidorah that was born in our selected appropriate time range for our legendary universe, consumed food of that era, and once it ran out, it left and then just returned later on. Basically, we have a Earthborn Ghidorah that comes from space in the future. So we get a mix there, which is kind of interesting. And then we have our Ghidorahs later on from that, which would be our Millennium Series Ghidorahs, with 2001, the Thousand-Year Dragon, where Ghidorah is a Earth Guardian dragon, which is why he's stylized like a traditional Chinese dragon, also with implements of the Showa design, plus Varan, if you didn't know that Ghidorah was supposed to be Varan. That's why its face looks like Varan. But that's besides the point. We have another Earth Ghidorah, and this was our only, basically, humanity-friendly Ghidorah at that. So this Ghidorah was definitely a weird one, and he was small too. So we have another Earth Ghidorah, and then finally our last Ghidorah of the Millennium Series, Kaiser Ghidorah, arguably the most powerful Ghidorah, and if not the most powerful Godzilla villain of all time, basically sweeping, killing Godzilla no problem without intervention of humanity. So, if you want to argue that Destroyer or a different kaiju is stronger, you're just wrong right off the bat. I'm sorry. Kaiser Ghidorah is the strongest enemy. That's why he was the final villain of Final Wars. Just saying. So we get another space monster. The only thing that really fits is the Thousand-Year Dragon, but what fits better is the Cretaceous and Grand. So we have our Cretaceous Ghidorah that feeds, is born in that time frame, leaves, and then comes back. So what can we say about Godzilla 2? Well, if our Ghidorah is Earthborn, I think we might get a Ghidorah that looks similar to Cretaceous Ghidorah. We get a very, not like dragon scale, but more like alligator and crocodile scale pattern Ghidorah. Very dinosauric-like features, which is what we see in Godzilla in the 2014 movie. At least he's very dinosaurish. He's less Godzilla and more big dinosaur. So our Ghidorah is probably going to look something like that if they go that route with an Earth Ghidorah. That's probably what it's going to be, because I doubt we're going to get just a space monster, because that's a bit of a stretch for this universe. Especially since we have the cave paintings, unless Ghidorah was some kind of predator that came from another planet, clashed with Earth's kaiju, and then left, and now in the new movie we're going to see his return, which is always possible, because that's kind of almost the pattern that we saw in Rebirth of Mothra 3, with Cretaceous Ghidorah eating all of the food, leaving, and then coming back at a later date to kind of see what's changed, and then finding a new food source. So honestly, what I think is going to happen is we're going to have a Earth origin Ghidorah, and it's either going to stay on Earth, or it's going to be the Earth origin Ghidorah that left and then comes back for this movie. The reason I think that that's still a likely case, that it left after its original clash with Godzilla and the other kaiju, is Ghidorah is probably going to be insanely massive compared to our other kaiju. That's Ghidorah's, one of its trademark-like things about his design, is that he's supposed to be this super massive being. And he's also a flying being as well. Hiding Godzilla this long makes sense because he has had the ability to live in the ocean. Rodan is a flying creature, so he could very easily flown to a very remote location and hid there effectively, because he's generally half the size, or like 75% of the size of Godzilla. And Mothra too, especially if we started as a larva, that makes sense. That could totally be buried underground. But Ghidorah being so much larger than the rest of these kaiju, I find it hard for there to be a justifiable or believable location that Ghidorah could have been hiding in, being this giant, majestic, super proud dragon that loves open environments and flying around. I don't see Ghidorah cramming himself into a cave and sleeping for millions of years. At least a Ghidorah like this. Obviously our Thousand-Year Dragon from GMK did that, but that was because he was sleeping and growing over time. This Ghidorah is already bigger than Godzilla, according to the cave paintings. So he doesn't need to grow. And there's definitely food on the planet. There's definitely prey. So why would he want to cram himself into a small, basic prison? Why would he make that decision to imprison himself? Which is why I'm leaning kind of towards, what if he does leave and come back? Because then we get a justifiable origin for the monster, being born on Earth as a prehistoric creature, but we also get that throwback Showa, like, nostalgia that Ghidorah comes from space, he might not have been born on a different planet, but he could have come back from another planet. I mean, they would have to do some stretching there as well, because obviously organisms can't just survive in space unless they have some kind of adaptive feature to that. So, I mean, we are talking about kaiju here, so anything really could go at this point. So I want to think that they could potentially keep the somewhat space origin door open for this kaiju, because that's really kind of like his thing. I mean, they've changed it many times over the years from the original Showa, this is a space monster, but for Final Wars they brought it back as like, yeah, this is a space monster. And then Rebirth of Mothra 3, we got the best of both worlds, where Ghidorah was born on Earth, but for this kaiju conflict he came from space. He came down on an asteroid. Which, I mean, what if Ghidorah comes down on an asteroid in this movie? I mean, then we're really looking at Ghidorah the three-headed monster, which is what our monster system that we have right now of this movie is based off of. So it's really interesting to think what they could possibly do, because I don't think that Ghidorah is going to be crammed into a cave somewhere and hiding. But then again, what if they do? I mean, I feel like, God, that would be such a weird thing for this kind of a King Ghidorah. Like, yeah, this King Ghidorah was crammed inside of a cave waiting for something. What was he waiting for? Especially with all these years without kaiju besides Godzilla, why now? Obviously, the synopsis says they're battling for supremacy amongst each other, but why wouldn't have Ghidorah just awakened before if he's already on the planet to reign over the planet as the king that he's born to be? Why does he have to wait for Godzilla to already be up fighting Mutos on the surface? Why does he have to wait for Mothra and Rodan to awaken 5 years after that? Why? What's the justification? What are they going to say? This is why Ghidorah is awake. I honestly think, I want to think that we're going to have some kind of mix between Ghidorah as a prehistoric creature, like the legendary kaiju have been up to so far, but also some kind of foreign threat from another place. I want there to be a healthy balance in there, because I don't want to lose that nostalgic Ghidorah feeling. I also want a healthy balance between the prehistoric design kaiju plus the traditional Ghidorah. I want a balance between there, which is why I think that the Cretaceous and Grand King Ghidorah scheme is working out the best for kind of where they might be basing this off of, because the design makes sense for Legendary and the origin makes sense for the Legendary Monsterverse. Obviously not a carbon copy, but something similar. That's at least what I'm gonna think. Let me know what you guys think this Ghidorah is going to look like, where this Ghidorah is going to come from, anything like that. Let me know, because obviously everyone's going to have their own idea. This is just what I believe based off of what we've seen with the character thus far and trying to piece it into this universe. But that's going to be all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace out.